Welcome back to a little bit more Physiology Madness with Dr. H. All we're going to be doing today is introducing the basics of blood typing. Now, in order to understand blood typing, we just need to understand a few key words. The first is that with blood typing, there's actually a blood typing systems out there. There are two major types of blood typing systems that we're going to be talking about today. So blood typing systems. There's a ABO system, and there is the RH system. Now, RH, lots of different types of RHs out there, but we're going to be focusing on a particular part of RH, which we'll discuss in just a minute. So, in order to get started on ABO systems, we actually need to know another keyword, and that keyword is antigens. So, let's introduce an antigen. Antigen. Now, antigens are proteins that are, in essence, part of your immune system. And what they are is they are a protein that marks things as self. Basically, they're protein flags that mark or identify self. And they're there for your immune system. I should say they're proteins. They're there for your immune system. So in essence, if something foreign enters your body wants to kill it. And in order for your body not to kill it, you have flags. You have these antigens that say, hey, I'm me, don't kill me. And therefore your immune system tends to leave it alone. Again, these are proteins that mark self. What does your body have that's trying to fight the world around us? Well, there's a couple of things. First, we have white blood cells. These are called leukocytes. And there are a number of major leukocytes, 5 major leukocytes, but we're going to focus in on one type of leukocyte, and that is a lymphocyte. And lymphocytes are white blood cells. They're leukocytes. And these are basically like security force. They run around. They find things that are not supposed to be in your body. And they create a flag that says, let's remove this. What lymphocytes are going to go around and flag foreign objects with is something called an antibody. So that's another key word here. So what do lymphocytes produce? They produce antibodies. And then these antibodies flag foreign material for removal. Removal by things like monocytes. Monocytes are going to be the primary things that come in and phagocytize. They engulf these objects that have now been flagged by antibodies. So if anything foreign gets into the body, lymphocytes flag that foreign object with antibodies. Why do lymphocytes not flag your body as foreign? Because they are marked with an antigen. Something that says, I belong here. Don't kill me, please. What are antibodies? Let's go one step further. It's going to help us learn a new term. So antibodies are also proteins, okay? And these protein flags, they are Y-shaped proteins. These antibodies, they are Y-shaped proteins. Mostly proteins. Good enough for the purpose of this particular video. And what these things do is if something foreign comes into the body, say for instance, a little red blood cell here that shouldn't be here, these little proteins, they're going to bind and create a little Y-shaped flag. One side of the Y shape is sticky, but a cool part of these antibodies is that all sides are sticky. So now there's not going to just be one foreign red blood cell in the body. There might be another one and another one. And each one of them binds to that antibody. Well, that's not the only antibody that's here. There could be multiple other antibodies that are here. And what's going to start to happen is these antibodies are going to start to clump all of the foreign objects together. This floating raft of blood cells, foreign blood cells that are in the body. This clumping of these foreign objects has a name. This clumping is called agglutination. So any agglutinator protein, like an antibody, that causes the clumping of things together, this is called what? This is called agglutination. So let's see what our keywords are here so far. We've talked about agglutination. We've talked about antibodies. And we've talked about antigens. Those are our major key players that we want to be able to identify at this point. And each one of those is going to help us understand these two systems, the ABO system and that RH system. So let's look first at the ABO system. And in the ABO system, what we have are two major antigens. There's an A antigen and there's a B antigen. So in the ABO system, there's an A antigen and there's a B antigen. Now, if somebody has the A antigen in the ABO system, we call that blood type type A. So let's say that again. If they have the A antigen, we call that blood type type what? Type A. Because the type of blood you have has to do with the antigen present on your blood. What if they have a B antigen? Then we call this blood type type B. What if they have both of these antigens? What if they have both A antigen and B antigen? Then we're going to call this blood type AB. And what if they don't have any antigens? What if they don't have, let's say they don't have either A antigen or B antigen? That's going to be blood type O. So if they have the A antigen, antigen's present, we're going to say it has the A antigen. What do we already know about the blood type? This is going to be a type A blood. What if it has a B antigen? Then this is going to be a type B blood. What if it has both the A antigen and the B antigen? Then we know this is a type AB blood. And last but not least, what if it doesn't have any, or either, I should say, A or B? So neither A or B antigens. Then we're going to call this blood type O. I think that's pretty simple to start off with. If it has the A antigen, boom, blood type's A. Sweet. Next, what about this word over here? Preformed antibodies versus exposure antibodies. Preformed antibodies versus antibodies that you're going to get after you've been exposed to something. So there's two different types of antibodies we're going to discuss today. Two different types of antibodies. So let's write these two down. So when it comes to antibodies, there are two types of antibodies, two categories of antibodies we're going to discuss today. One, preformed. So let's go ahead and discuss this one. A preformed antibody, this is one that you are born with. This is one that is innate. It's a part of you. This is one that was passed down by mom. These preformed antibodies are passed down by mom, and you're going to be getting more of the preformed antibodies in the milk you're drinking, but you're born with these preformed antibodies. These preformed antibodies, remember, are antibodies, in essence lymphocytes. They're antibodies the body is producing. These antibodies that your blood has, these cause agglutination of things that are foreign. So if we have the antibody, if something does not belong in our body, it's going to go through a process of agglutination. I'll say it again. If we have a preformed antibody, if something foreign enters our body, and we have the antibody for it, then that's going to cause agglutination. So if we're an A antigen, let's go back up here. If we're an A antigen, we're a type A blood. Do we want to have an antibody against A? And I hope you guys are saying, no, Dr. H, because if we had the antibody against A, then that would attack the A antigen that's already present. And it would cause agglutination. And agglutination is bad for many different reasons I don't want to get into in this particular video. So preformed antibodies. If you have preformed antibodies, you're going to either have what's called anti-A, or you're going to have anti-B. Those are the two major preformed antibodies that we're going to be discussing here today. Again, you can see there's more to blood typing than what I can talk about today, but this is sufficient for understanding the basics of blood typing. So if somebody with an A antigen or a type A blood had anti-A, well then that anti-A would kill their own blood, in essence, which is of course not good. So what does this person have? Well, what would be foreign to them? The B antigen would be foreign to them. So what preform are they born with? Anti-B. They have the antibody that's opposite of the blood type that they have. What about a B antigen person? Well, then they are going to have anti-A. What about an what about an A antigen and a B antigen? Well, they're not going to have either, right? They don't have these preformed antibodies. They have neither. I never finished writing. An R down here. That's funny. They have neither an anti-A, or they don't also have an anti-B. Because if they did, then those antibodies would attack their antigens. Now what about an O, a type O blood, which doesn't have any of these ABO antigens? Well, now these are going to have both an anti-A and an anti-B, because if they're exposed to an A-type blood, well, they don't have the antigen, therefore that would be foreign. So they have an antibody against it. Sweet. So the last part of this puzzle, let's see, what color do I want to use here? The last part of this puzzle is related to this RH system. So we're going to go ahead and write in RH. We'll do our RH system here. We don't really need much for an RH system. There's a lot of information on an RH system and how they were formed, and it's actually quite a complicated system. But for the purpose of what we want to know is that you could either have an RH positive or you can have an RH negative. Well, what is an RH? Well, that means rhesus. It has to do with the monkeys that they were discovered in. But in essence, what this is, it's another type of antigen. RH actually is another type of antigen, and it's called a D antigen. And there's other RH factors as well, Ds and Es and all sorts of crazy stuff, but we're going to focus on the D antigen here. So in other words, if somebody is an RH plus, then they have the D antigen. And if somebody is an RH minus, they do not have the D antigen. So what we're going to do over here is we're actually going to add another group of people. We're going to add another group of people, but these people are going to have the A antigen, and they're going to have the D antigen. So let's look at this patient now that has both A and D, whereas this patient up here does not have the D antigen. And we just said that if they do have the D antigen, we're going to say that they are a plus. So this patient right here does not have the A antigen, therefore, this person here does not have the D antigen, therefore they are going to be a minus. So this is a type A minus blood, whereas this one here would be a type A plus blood. This one, if it only had the B antigen, would be a B minus blood. And this one here, if it had the B antigen and the D antigen, this would be a B plus. This one here, this is an A antigen and a B antigen, but no D antigen, so this is an AB minus. And this patient, let's say they have an A antigen, a B antigen, and a D antigen. Therefore, they are a AB plus. This patient here has neither A or B, and it also doesn't have D. So this is an O minus. And then this last patient would be neither A or B. However, this patient would have a D antigen. Therefore, they are a O plus. We write it all out. We start from scratch, we write it all out, and that allows us to understand this in a little bit better detail. Over here, preformed antibodies. What makes the RH unique is that it does not have preformed antibodies for it. This D antigen, we don't have antibodies that we're born with that can fight it. So a person that is A positive, they only have anti-B that they are born with. Somebody that is B positive, they still only have anti-A. It doesn't change. If they're AB positive, they don't have either of the anti-A, nor do they have the anti-B. And on O blood, they're going to have both anti-A and anti-B, whether they're plus or minus. It doesn't matter. This is what they're born with. Anti-A, anti-B. What makes RH or D antigen unique is that this particular antigen, you're either born with the gene or you're not, this one the body responds to if you're exposed to it. So say, for instance, you don't have the antigen, and then you are exposed to the antigen later in life. Your body is going to freak out, and it's going to start to produce antibodies against it at that point. So it's only after exposure. Again, you only are going to be producing antibodies to the D antigen after you've been exposed to the D antigen. And that's what this column right here is all about. Are these antibodies acquired after exposure? Which antibodies? The RH or the D, right? My son's been using these markers. Anti-D. Are these anti-D antibodies acquired after exposure? Yes, no. Well, if they are a minus, that means they were not born with the D antigen. Therefore, the D antigen is foreign. And therefore, yes, they will produce antibodies against it. What if they're an A+? Well, they already have the D antigen. So if they're exposed to it, it doesn't seem foreign to them. So no, they will not. And this goes down the list. If they're a minus, they will always produce antibodies against it after they're exposed to it. And if they're a plus, they never will. So yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. You can see there's just a pattern here. Sweet. All right. one more thing here. I'm not going to go into like Mendelian genetics or anything along those lines. You guys can look all that up. It's just your typical Mendelian genetics. So the most likely scenario with Rh factor is that if your parent has a plus, then the most likely scenario is that you will also have a plus. It's not 100% because it's Mendelian genetics. There is a possibility you'll have the recessive gene and you will get the minus. But again, I'll let you all go and look that up if you so choose. For the purpose of what we want to do here is we want to look at how this Rh negative would be able to affect giving blood and receiving blood. So if you have an A minus blood, would you ever want to receive A plus blood? If you don't have the antigen and you're exposed to the antigen, you're going to start to acquire antibodies against it, and that's not good. The first time you're exposed, you won't get too sick, but the second time you're exposed, you will get very sick and potentially die. So again, if you have an A minus blood, you're exposed to it, you start producing antibodies, then the next time you're exposed to it, you will most likely die. Another place where this comes into play with blood typing is, what if you are a type A blood, A minus for instance, and you're given a B minus blood? Well, if you're an A minus, what antibody do you have? You have an anti-B. So then somebody gives you a type B blood, which has the B antigen, and your body's going to freak out. It's going to cause agglutination. These get blocked up in your blood vessels. This is a big raft of blood, red blood cells, and it's going to block up the system, and now your tissues start to die, and lots of bad things can happen. So when we go to look at universal donors and universal acceptors, these might be terms you've heard before. There's only one universal donor, and that means there's a blood type that somebody has, and they could donate to any of the other blood types. What blood type is that? It's the blood type that does not have any antigens in it. And there's only one blood type that does not have any antigens, and that is an O negative. They don't have A's, they don't have B's, they don't have D's. They don't have any of those antigens. And therefore, somebody that's O negative, they're going to be the best friend to the Red Cross. Red Cross, if they find out you're O negative, they're going to call you every other week for a blood draw. This blood can be given to anybody. However, they can only receive O negative. If they don't have any antigens and they're given a B plus, that's a double whammy. Even if they're given an O plus, they can't have that because the plus is on there. So an O negative is a universal donor. They can only receive O negative though. Whereas somebody that is AB positive, what do you see about this AB positive is they have every antigen on them. And therefore an AB positive can receive an A blood, whether it's A minus or an A plus, it doesn't matter. They can receive a B blood. Whether it's B minus or B plus, it doesn't matter because they have the B antigen and the D antigen. Can they receive O? Absolutely, because those don't even have antigens. So if those go into an AB positive blood, they don't even notice that they're there. It just becomes part of the body. So these here, AB positive, are known as a universal acceptor. They can accept any. They can accept any blood. All right. So blood typing, how do we do it? That's the last part of this. I promise we'll be all done after this. How do we do blood typing? Well, the old school method that's still kind of what's used in practice a lot is something called an Eldon card. And with an Eldon card, what's done is in a laboratory situation, they create a card, and that card has 1, 2, 3, technically a fourth circle that would be a control. The first circle would have antibodies against A on it. Okay, this is just desiccated antibodies. We actually basically have functional antibodies. They're proteins. They get bound to the card. They're just sitting here on this card. In this circle, there would be antibody B, so anti-B. In this circle, there'd be antibody D, so anti-D. And what do we know? If there was anti-A here, this was artificially placed on this card in a lab. then if the A antigen were to come into contact with it, that would cause agglutination. Again, if we had a card that had anti-A on it, and we expose that to the A antigen, it would cause agglutination. So if I were to put a patient's blood onto this card, and they were a type A blood, then we would see clumping of those blood cells right here. It would cause agglutination. Whereas they do not have the antigen against B. So anti-B would not agglutinate. It would just look like red blood smeared across this circle. Again, this person is a D negative, so they don't have this antigen, and therefore they don't have an antigen to agglutinate here, and so this would just look like a smooth circle. Let's do another one. Let's do a B positive. So with a B positive, they have the B antigen, therefore anti-B would agglutinate. So now we're going to see clumping in the B row. They have the B blood, therefore agglutination happens. Here in the A row, well, they don't have an A antigen, therefore it does not agglutinate, and we just shade that in. Do they have the D antigen? Yes, they do. Therefore, when it goes on to the anti-D, it will agglutinate. And we see agglutination here as well. Let's do another one. Let's do AB negative. Hopefully you're starting to get the hang of this. If they have the A antigen and it goes onto an anti-A, then what do we see? Agglutination. If it goes onto the anti-B and they have the B antigen, what do we see? Agglutination. It does not have, with an AB negative blood, it does not have the D antigen. So the anti-D does not agglutinate. And it's really this simple. There's a key. There's a trick. It's a simple trick. If they have the blood type, then they will agglutinate. If they have that blood type, it will agglutinate. Remember, this is not inside the body. This is artificial. If they agglutinated inside their body, they would get really sick and most likely die. But this is artificial. This is done in a lab. So if they had the blood type, then it agglutinates. So if it's A+, it's going to agglutinate on A, and it's going to agglutinate on D. Where does it not agglutinate? On B. They don't have that blood type. So it does not agglutinate there. Whereas here, this patient is B, so they agglutinate on B. This patient is a B-, therefore it does not agglutinate on the anti-D, because they don't have that antigen, and it does not agglutinate on A, because they don't have that antigen. AB+, they have every one of these antigens, therefore this is going to agglutinate across the board. Every one of these is going to show agglutination. Every single one of these. This patient is an O negative, so none of these are going to agglutinate. They don't have the antigen. So it cannot agglutinate. And this person is a O negative, so it does not agglutinate on A. They don't have the antigen. It does not agglutinate on B. It does not have the antigen. However, it does agglutinate on the plus. I hope you found this useful for learning the basics of blood typing. There is a lot more information out there on blood typing, like what happens if a mother has a Rh negative and the father has a Rh positive. More importantly, if the mother has the Rh negative and the baby has the Rh positive. If the father's positive, the most likely scenario is the baby will be positive. So now we have a mother with a negative. Well, they don't have the D antigen, but the baby does. And therefore the mother is going to recognize the baby potentially as foreign, but only because it's an Rh once that mother's been exposed to the anti-D. So think about what would happen there. Blood, well, let's go this route. Childbirth is a bloody process. And going into childbirth, the baby starts to share its blood with mom. Mom's been sharing its blood with the baby the entire time, but now the baby crosses blood over with the mom, and the mom becomes exposed to the Rh plus. And following exposure, the mother starts to produce antibodies against that plus blood. And that's okay for the first baby. The first baby is going to be born typically no problems at all. But now another baby, she's pregnant with another baby, and that baby's a plus. She now has antibodies against it, and now her body's going to attack it. This is called erythroblastosis fetalis. Erythro, meaning red blood cells. Blastosis, meaning to make blood cells. And then fetalis, meaning the fetal environment. And it causes hemolysis of these cells. It's not good. It causes lots of problems, potential death. So that's why if you are a mother with a negative type blood, they're going to give you shots of Rogam. Rogam, somewhere is around 26, 28 weeks of pregnancy, and then right before you give birth as well. And that should prevent you from producing antibodies against the D antigen, this Rogam, R-H-O-GAM, G-A-M. So cool information that's out there. There's lots more information out there, but that's how much I want to introduce to y'all with this particular video. So everybody, be kind and human, because we are humankind. That's right, humankind, be both. Peace.